And there's this beautiful quote that you have on your website, because the Center for Abused Children does so much. But one of the key issues that this organization, your organization, does is provide lawyers for children. And there's this amazing quote on there. You said, the accused have rights to an attorney, but children don't. Now, can you elaborate on sort of how this came about and what the need is for this desperate need is for the service that you provide?
Yeah, so probably like your listeners, I had no idea. I just assumed that if a child had been abused or was the subject of incest, that when they were in court, that they would have an attorney by their side to enforce their rights and guide their case. And I found out through attending all of these hearings for my foster infants that the state is represented by attorneys and the biological parents are represented with attorneys, but the child victims, by and large, are not and do not have representation. And this is true in most states. So the first thing we did at the center was to establish a pro bono children's law clinic, so that if you were caring for a child in foster care, you might be grandma, you could be big sister, you could be a foster family unrelated. If that child's case wasn't going according to law or they were lingering, you could come to us and we would push through and help that case. And we helped children who had been trafficked and incest victims and all kinds of just incredible children. And then a couple of years ago in Arizona, we were able to pass a law that was unanimous that actually gives every abused child an attorney in their case. So now all of the rights they have on the books can be enforced by that attorney. So we're very grateful for that and would like to see that, of course, happen nationwide for all kids. All child victims deserve that.
I think my audience right now is like, wait, what do you mean children don't have attorneys? And I love that you spelled that out, of each individual that has an attorney except for the abused child. So it's so phenomenal what you passed in Arizona, and I'm behind you 100%. This needs to be in every single state in America. It's beautiful, the work that you are doing. I wanted to touch on something because for the audience, and you'll hopefully check out her website, but since founding this organization in 2017, you've helped over 500,000 children. That's huge. And when we get to sort of the end of our episode here, I would love for you to share some stories of your children, because there's just some beautiful success stories that I've had the honor to read. And I want my audience to understand that too. So let's go back a little bit. So for children's rights and lawyers advocates, there's been a lot of changes in laws that you have proposed. And one of them I thought was so interesting, which was to be out of foster care limbo, as you put it. Can you explain to the audience what that means? Because I think the majority of my audience doesn't understand how foster care works, and I didn't either. And the changes that you're sort of implementing. Let's start there.
So I thought that children in foster care were largely delinquent teens. That's what I had always believed. I don't know why I had that impression, but it turns out that a lot of people think that. But the reality is that children who end up in foster care are children, by and large, who have been abused or neglected. And neglected means, starved, babies left in their cribs for weeks, things like that. So it's not as benign as it sounds. You end up in the system because your life is in imminent danger. And so the state will come in and put you in the system. The first thing they're supposed to try to do is find a relative who can take care of you for whatever period of time until your parents hopefully can get themselves straightened out and take care of you. But if there aren't relatives, then you get placed with another family, like someone like mine who just signed up and said, yeah, I can open a room and a crib and I could take in an extra child, or I could take in siblings for a little while. And then what happens is a parent is offered all kinds of services by the state. It could be drug rehabilitation, mental health services, domestic violence prevention, things like that. And they have an opportunity to remedy whatever that very serious danger was, and to try to have their children reunified with them. And if that can't happen, and about half the time it happens, half the time it doesn't, then the child will need to be adopted. And a lot of family members, a lot of grandmas end up adopting their grandkids, or families like mine who have been taking care of a child, and you've been mom. And so the question says, will you adopt? And you say, well, of course I will, because I'm all this child's ever known. And so that's when you have those adoptions. But that period of time between going into the system and either going home or to another forever family, for some children, that can be years and years. And I knew a boy who ended up being my my godson. And he went into foster care at 3 and was adopted at 17. So during the course of his life, so he was raised in foster care. He was in 47 different homes. That's what we're trying to stop. We want it to be so that when a kid comes into the system, they have an attorney, and they can either go to a relative right away, a safe foster family right away, and within a year to a year and a half, they either get to go home, or if the parents can't straighten it out, they go into an adoption. But kids' lives shouldn't be in limbo year after year after year, all at the, so the parents can have as much time as they need. It's not a fair equation, because the children's lives matter too. And so we're just trying to make sure that the kids also have a voice in this, and that they're not aging out or disappearing from the system, and some of the horrible outcomes that we see once you enter the foster care system.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because one of the reasons that foster care is so dear to me is because anyone in the trafficking world, there's a saying that foster care is for girls a straight line to trafficking, and for boys a straight line to prison. And that's not okay in any way, shape, or form. These are, as you know, children that have fallen on sometimes horrific circumstances through no fault of their own, and they deserve a system that can support them and help get them to, as you put it, a forever family. So I so commend the work that you're doing. There's another piece that because I read all the points that you guys have sort of introduced, and some you've gotten adopted and some are still sort of in the works, and we want to export these all over America. One of the things that you put in there was to streamline adoptions for teens. And there was also another term in there that said, no longer want to label a kid unadoptable. So I was like, I had to read it again. And I was like, because I'm not that familiar with the system. There are kids labeled unadoptable. What does that mean exactly?
Well, what that means is that when you're in the hands of the state, and the state is taking care of you, and you're with a foster family, if you are a child who has some behavior problems that make you a little bit difficult, and the state's been looking for maybe 6 months for a home for you, they can at any point just decide to stop looking for a forever home for you. And in their minds, you're unadoptable, and they stop the search. And so those are the kids who they just put in group homes, and they basically write them off. I mean, there's really no big effort to try to find families with the skills to help these kids who have suffered so much trauma and need some love and some guidance. And, and you can't tell me in a country of millions of families like America that we don't have a few thousand families who can take in these truly needy kids. Of course, they're out there. So we need to build a bridge between these children with challenges and the families who not only can help them with them, but want to help and want to serve. And so that's one of the things we're trying to do, is make sure those bridges are built, and telling the state, you can't just declare a child unadoptable. They have the right to a family, and you have to keep searching until a family is found.
I love that so much. And it's such a no-brainer, and it's a shock for me, and I'm sure it's a shock for my audience, that a state can decide whether you have the right to a family or not.